Hmm, let me see. This is it. This is the outline maps of the world in Braille. I've been blind since birth. My partner gave me this atlas in 2008. I studied international relations, and he knew how important it was for me to understand the shapes of the countries. This volume gives me a very clear picture of where countries are in relation to other countries, the size and shape of the borders, and other features like mountains and rivers and oceans and lakes. I always come back to this atlas whenever there is something important happening in the world, like the war in Ukraine. The title of this documentary is What is a Print Disability? My name is Daniela Levi Pinto. I am a fair-skinned woman with long, curly brown hair. I am the manager of NELS, National Network for Equitable Library Service. Here's the website. NELS, like CELA, the Center for Equitable Library Access, are non-profit, publicly funded Canadian organizations that provide accessible reading services to the approximately 3 million people in Canada that have a print disability. Print or perceptual disabilities are defined in the Canadian Copyright Act. According to the Act, a perceptual disability is a disability that prevents or inhibits a person from reading or hearing a literary, musical, dramatic, or artistic work in its original format. I'll let my screen reader finish the definition.
Bullet, a severe or total impairment of sight or hearing or the inability to focus or move one's eyes. Bullet B, the inability to hold or manipulate a book. Or bullet C, an impairment relating to comprehension.
The Canadian Copyright Act allows organizations like NELS and CELA to create accessible versions of traditional print content, for example, by reproducing it into alternate formats like Braille. This is called remediation. Remediation methods like scanning a print book and converting it into a digital format allow people with print disabilities to read using digital devices like computers or smartphones. But this can be an expensive and cumbersome process that requires specialized skills and tools. This is my beautiful guide dog Angelo taking a break, sprawled beside my desk. He's a yellow lab golden retriever cross, and he helps me get around. Assistive technologies like my Braille typewriter, screen readers, and formats like audio do help with reading, but they do not always solve the problem of access for everyone with a print disability.
I really like print disability, especially because also in French, we don't have like a great word for print disability, but I think this word like allow to contextualize disability. So mainly it's not the person, but like it's the environment and like the specific format of print that disable.
Melissa Cassiu is a student in political science and women's studies at the Université du Québec à Montréal.
I'm dyslexic and dysorthographic, which mean have a learning disability that's very specific to reading and writing. And I'm a light-skinned woman with brown hair, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck jumper.
For people with learning disabilities, the task of decoding words and sentences is not automatic.
I would say like a so-called traditional reader would read their book and almost like forget they're in front of their book. On the opposite, reading it as the dyslexic, it's a bit like if you need to think at every step you take in order to be walking. Somebody that have automatized the skill of walking don't need to think in their head. The task goes almost by itself, and they have like energy to think about other things.
Melissa is an intellectual and a scholar. For her, keeping up with her reading can be exhausting.
If you have to work double than most people at school and follow like a normal curriculum, it means you're going to have to cut your social activity. You will have to cut sleep. And especially if you're in academia, and it means you need to do that for like a long period of time, and maybe thinking of doing a PhD. So I can't have like this mentality of like rushing, getting really tired, because I need to do that for a long run.
I am very much a researcher. In the work that I do as a writer, I do have to dig into a lot of documents.
This is Tanisha Samuel.
And so it's best for me to use digital materials in order to get the information that I do need to do my work.
Tanisha is a writer, teacher, and activist. They are also a consultant on equity, diversity, and inclusion.
I identify as a disabled, visually impaired, hard of hearing, mad, queer, trans, non-binary, Black individual, and I do a lot of work within this space.
People with print disabilities like Tanisha know there is a lot of print content out there, material they may want or even need, but they often cannot even get to it because so much is inaccessible.
Oh, it's so frustrating. Whenever I encounter something that I know is going to be exactly what I need for a particular project, I feel completely blocked off from having access to knowledge, having access to what's important for me to get my work done.
I do find formats that are accessible, but for instance, I have like 5 texts to read, and I find one in audiobook, and I find another in EPUB, and another in PDF, and then another in print.
This is Melissa Castillo.
Even if I find some accessible, the fact I need to use like 5 different platforms to read my book is itself like quite demanding in terms of like, maybe I'm going ahead, but there's a need for kind of like an accessible ecosystem and like a consistency, because this makes it hard.
In an equitable reading ecosystem, as Melissa put it, all the pieces from the original book to every link in the distribution chain, including libraries, electronic bookstores, websites, and reading applications, should be designed with accessibility in mind. In such an ecosystem, content would be born accessible. That would enable all readers, regardless of ability, to choose the technology and personalized settings that work best for their reading needs.
I read using accessibility devices such as I'll use my phone, but I change the color, so I'll have a black background and have the letters be white so that they pop up. And then I can zoom in really close. When the contrast is really sharp, then that makes it easier for me to read. Without that, I can't read the words. And when possible, sometimes I use a program that can read out what's on a site or on the screen for me. My name is Ingrid Palmer. I'm a Black female, mom of 3, grandmother of 1, social justice advocate, and I'm visually impaired.
Barriers to print are very frustrating. For people like Ingrid, finding accessible materials can be very empowering.
It's really exciting, and it's something that you can that you want, that you can have, and that you can manage on your own. Like, it just feels liberating. It's a happy day. It's something that you actually get excited about, and that feels really good and can actually make your day.
People with print disabilities like Ingrid and Tanisha have a message for content creators.
I would definitely encourage them to create content that can be transferred to multiple formats, from audio to, let's say, PDF, to variants in language, maybe keeping academic language to a minimum, just for people with different learning styles. Have an open mind as to how you'd like to convey your message. It can be done in so many different ways.
This is Shiza Amir.
I have long black wavy hair and round black eyes. I'm currently smiling. I'm a student at Humber. In the program Community Integration to Cooperative Education, the CICE is designed for individuals with intellectual disabilities to give students an opportunity to attend college.
The world of inclusive publishing has to address the needs of people with diverse cognitive abilities, like the poet Shiza Amir.
How would we consider disability? It is our responsibility to stand up for ourselves, seeing our abilities and capabilities are endless, our possibilities, striving for being the best version of ourselves. We are creating our legacy.
There are so many ways to make content accessible, but there are also many kinds of barriers, such as those created by political and economic inequities.
As an Indigenous librarian, I can tell you there are barriers within libraries. Libraries are very inherently colonial. They can be intimidating institutions for those who haven't grown up in libraries. I think that that's a huge barrier.
This is Colette Potra.
I think there are other ones, like there's connectivity barriers within Indigenous communities. And of course, a lot of these accessible resources, there are costs involved with that are all barriers for those that are in Indigenous communities. I'd actually like to start by introducing myself in an Indigenous way, or in the Métis way. Hanji Kia, Nicolette Patradishnikishun, Lefemachifnia. I'm a white-coated Métis woman with deep roots in the Red River, Batoche, and St. Paul de Métis areas, and I don't have a print disability.
Speaking as someone who has a print disability, one that I can't hide, I value the work of librarians like Colette, who know that disclosing a disability can be sometimes difficult.
There are people with cognitive disabilities such as dyslexia or ADD, which makes reading traditional print tough, for Parkinson's, MS. And then there's physical sometimes barriers, like even carpal tunnel syndrome. And of course, there's vision loss as well. And I speak completely as a library person, but if library folks aren't aware about all of the options that there are available, it's hard for people to openly kind of identify them and kind of advocate for them. I think that's where staff have a responsibility, kind of like an information kind of crusade, that everybody should know that these resources exist. And then once people are aware, they might be more comfortable in self-declaration.
This is Adam Kohun, someone who is a crusader for disability rights, motoring around in his wheelchair.
I am an artist, filmmaker, and tech tester. I have cerebral palsy, and I have a print disability because I cannot manipulate paper, and because of my limited hand dexterity, I'm also cannot write and have been a very slow typer, so that also affects my ability to work with the printed word.
Adam has lived with barriers for most of his life. Even so, the idea of print disability was new to him.
And it wasn't until I actually went to a focus group pre-pandemic on print disabilities that I learned that it was considered a separate disability and that I did have rights under the AODA to actually ask for that accommodation.
The AODA is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act.
I regularly go to church, and I still, during the pandemic, still go online. But when I was going to church in person, the biggest problem I had was following along with what's called the liturgy. And those are the prayers and other things that you would recite at church because it was in a printed bulletin.
Adam can't manipulate paper, so following the liturgy was tough. At first, there was some hesitation at his church about how to go digital. But then the COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything moved online, including the liturgy.
I really don't think that God really cares which way our eyes are looking when we're reading off notes anyway.
Digital formats and assistive technology can help overcome barriers and make the world more accessible for everyone. But when the design is bad or careless, it can actually make things much worse. Here's Adam Cahoon trying to read a plaque about a public piece of art in a Toronto plaza.
All the plaques with all the information for the pieces are actually interlaid in the actual ground. So it is harder for somebody like me to read. And I wouldn't actually know where to look for it if I wasn't purposely searching for that.
Thoughtless design can make it difficult for people with print disabilities to participate in cultural life. Even worse, it can also undermine essential everyday activities. Here's Ingrid Palmer again.
I've banked at the same branch for a long time, and no matter which facility I go in, I'm very familiar, or I was, with the machines. I knew what buttons to touch for whether I was doing a deposit, a withdrawal, or whether I wanted to check on the balance of my account or pay bills. All of that I did independently, without any assistance. And one day I went to the bank, and lo and behold, they had replaced the machines with brand new ones, and it was awful.
The color, the contrast, the layout, everything had changed.
That's just another example of when organizations upgrade, they're not using a universal mindset. They're not thinking about everyone.
People with disabilities need content creators and designers to think about us. We need you to keep in mind the many ways in which the design of ebooks, museum plaques, websites, or digital technologies can become exclusionary and disabling. Eventually, Adam went online and found accessible information about a favorite piece of public sculpture in a nearby park. The piece is officially untitled. People in the neighborhood call it lampposts.
I love that sculpture. I like it because it actually about what it is a bunch of different lampposts, and they're all the different styles of different lampposts, and though it actually shows there is actually a variety around the city of stuff that is either there or used to be around.
It's that variety, the diverse ways in which people access print materials, that we need content creators to be aware of. We want you to make sure that content is accessible so that we have the freedom to work, travel, and play, just as I do with Angelo during our breaks. And because we want, and we have the right to, participate fully in the life of our communities.